So, October is over, folks. And here we are in November. What is it, the 6th?
Tomorrow's N7.
Tomorrow's N7 day. She always keeps track of this stuff for me. Also, the launch of... Wait, that's news for this month. We're doing October. Anyways, I took a long break from making these videos, but now I'm back with stuff that happened last month. So instead of doing videos about what happened last week, we're doing it months at a time because I'm very bad about time management. So without further ado, here's a snapshot of some of the stuff that happened last month in October. What's a better place than to talk about Electronic Arts? So let's talk about them. EA has been building up their reputation over the years. They've slowly been recovering from the years of online passes and lies about game releases and ridiculous microtransact. Maybe not the last part. They're still doing that. So, actually on that note, let's just go ahead and we'll move into what I was planning on talking about. So, let's start off with Star Wars.
Wait! My sock came out.
You're gonna walk across the screen with it.
Okay.
That happened. We'll go with that. I like that. That's a good transition. Who needs title cards up in the screen when I can have my wife carry a whiteboard?
And my husband's sweatpants.
It's a wife board.
Continue.
She's glaring at me right now. Anyways, Star Wars. Thank you, my love. We're going to talk about Star Wars because EA closed down a studio, and guess what that studio was working on? They were working on a Star Wars game. So, last month, EA shuttered Visceral Games and relocated most of the staff to other studios. You know, the developer responsible for the unnamed Star Wars game that was supposed to come out. That studio. Visceral, the creators of Dead Space, and that one Battlefield game that tried to be a TV cop show. It really wasn't that bad. It really sucks that Visceral was closed down. I know the Star Wars project hasn't really officially been canceled, but based on what EA's been saying about it, it sounds like they're going to be tacking on multiplayer and microtransactions, possibly even changing the game itself to cater to a wider audience. EA, your lack of faith in single-player games is disturbing. Please stop killing developers. So, since we're talking about Star Wars, let's talk about Battlefront II, because loot boxes are a thing now, and, well, not content to screw up only one Star Wars game, EA also shoehorned loot boxes into Star Wars Battlefront II. Battlefront's progression system was already awfully limited, but EA decided to take things a step further. And leveling up in Battlefront 2 doesn't do much for players, apparently. The entirety of the progression system seems to rely on loot boxes themselves, which are thankfully purchasable with real money. Fantastic. This seems like a concession made to offset the revenue lost by not having a season pass for the additional content. But loot boxes, really? Do you want to come up here? There we go. Okay. She wanted up. And then I have a kitty showing up now. It's like the big old congregation in here. EA responded to the backlash by stating that gamers weren't getting the full picture, and perhaps that was the case. There are a lot of elements, I'm sure, that are in the main game that we didn't see in the beta. So EA acquiesced. They've since vowed to alter the progression system to put more emphasis on player achievement, which is what progression systems are supposed to be about, I would think, not just randomly getting loot just because. And, you know, we'll have to wait and see whether or not this turns out to be any big change that's worth mentioning. Aww. Thank you. That's right. We're going to talk about Mass Effect Andromeda. Now, elsewhere, I know, right, huh? Elsewhere, information has surfaced that, somewhat silently, the fate of the Kila Sia, the Quarian arc that was hinted in the end of Mass Effect Andromeda. Sorry, spoilers if you didn't want to know anything about the game. A lot of people inferred, including myself, that it was going to be part of a DLC. Unfortunately, the information that came out is that sort of story element is being relegated to a book now, which means that officially they're not really focused on doing anything for the game anymore, which I realize they've already talked about kind of putting that on the back burner, so it just kind of sucks to have that confirmed by this news. I mean, I can't decide which is worse, EA and BioWare withholding a major plot point to sell as DLC, or the fact that the DLC at all is not going to come out. Athena and I are planning on releasing a series of posts about this topic, and you can look forward to that. But in other news, Nintendo has been knocking it out of the park lately. There's no question the Nintendo Switch is a breakout success. And I'm genuinely happy they've shaken off the abysmal failure of the Wii U console. What is the major Nintendo news for October? You probably already know. The big news for October is Super Mario Odyssey. And honestly, it's seems like it's a pretty great game. I got to play the demo for a bit, and to be perfectly honest, it's pretty fantastic. I had a big stupid grin on my face the entire time I played the demo, until my time ran out, that is, and I was kind of sad after that. And I didn't want to be that guy, so I just went ahead and ended my playtime on the display unit so that, everyone else could have a turn. I didn't want to shame them or anything by being so good at it. Yeah, other games released this October. Frankly, Super Mario Odyssey is the only one I really care about. The other games, Assassin's Creed, Wolfenstein 2. So, Nintendo, congratulations. You've done what few companies could. You sold me on a game using only a demo. And furthermore, you've also sold me on the console itself. I need a Switch now? And a copy of Super Mario Odyssey.
Firmware, not lasagna.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So, obviously, the Nintendo... Obviously, the Nintendo's only news is not just that Super Mario Odyssey came out. I got distracted.
No.
That's why there's a cut. So, let's talk about the Nintendo Switch firmware update, which, it was a big update. They added a lot of new features. Some of them are bigger features, like video capture, that's good. You want that. User and save transfer between Nintendo Switch systems, which it's one way apparently because Nintendo does stuff like that. Some were small yet pretty cool additions, like they have GameCube controller support now. The problem being is that I think it requires you to have the Wii U's GameCube controller hub, which I don't even know where you would get one of those besides eBay for $500. So hopefully Nintendo makes a few more of those. And then there's some smaller more secretive things that they added that they didn't really talk about. Reddit figured this one out. It's the wireless headset support, which is kind of a big deal because if you've seen the layout for how you use a headset for the Nintendo Switch, you will probably really like that they added this. To be perfectly honest, I mean, they've done good with updates and making the Nintendo Switch a good place to play video games, and it shows with how much third-party developers and publishers are working with Nintendo now to put games on their console. We've talked about Nintendo, so let's move on to the other major Japanese company, and that is Sony.
Spelled it backwards on purpose.
I love my wife. She's great. Anyways, so let's move on to different news in the form of hardware. And that is the PSVR SKU that they've added. They haven't been asleep at the wheel. The PSVR headset is pretty groundbreaking. It takes something that is usually either a piece of crap or expensive as hell and kind of makes it the lesser of each of those problems. And, it's going to have its new SKU on store shelves. And you may be wondering, like, what does this mean? This big news. The PSVR headsets were good. They weren't perfect. And that's the case for any early adopter type hardware. The problem being is that even though they released PS4 Pro and the PSVR headset around the same time, even with all the PS4 units being capable of outputting to HDR capable TVs and having HDR as an option, the original PSVR system doesn't allow you to use HDR on your console as long as you're using the processor unit pass-through. So basically, in order for you to use HDR when playing a PlayStation 4 game, you have to unplug your entire processor unit just to make HDR work. It's an inconvenience, is what I'm saying. And if anything, console gamers don't like to be inconvenienced. This is the whole reason why digital distribution of games is a big thing. Like, I can't count how many times people have described the reason why they buy digital is so that they don't have to get up and put a disc in. And Sony's basically making their old PSVR system, their headset, has to be used in this manner. Like, anyways, so they fixed the problem with this new PSVR headset. Which, I mean, there's other improvements, but the major one is that basically it's capable of outputting HDR through the pass-through device. The downside of this is that not only is it going to cost the same as the headset originally released for at $400 in the US, the processor unit is not going to be compatible with the original model of PlayStation VR headsets. Meaning that if you're one of those early adopters, you're SOL. So you have the choice of either sticking with the inconvenience or buying another $400 headset, which I can't decide which is worse. I imagine a lot of people are just going to stick with it and just deal with the inconvenience. Let's move on to a long-standing Sony series, Gran Turismo Sport. Gran Turismo Sport. Woo-woos.
It goes
And it's a car. It goes vroom, vroom.
Vroom, vroom.
Like a Mazda. Anyways, so Gran Turismo had another release this October, Gran Turismo Sport. Seen as a major competitor to Forza Motorsport, even though Gran Turismo came first. It was met with good reviews, and Polyphony Digital, the company that makes it, unfortunately made some pretty questionable decisions surrounding their game. You see, it's designed as an online multiplayer game primarily, with limited offline functionality. By limited, I'm not talking about a lack of campaign or story mode. That's pretty much any major racing game, save for like Need for Speed. The problem with it is that by lack of offline functionality, I'm talking like you can't buy cars without being online. You can't modify, or you can't modify your cars. You can't look at your cars. You can't change the livery or whatever, the look of your car. You can't save your game unless you're online. Now, they said that they're planning on fixing this at some point, but why, after Drive Club came out, are we looking at another racing game on Sony's platform that has trouble with the whole online functionality thing? I mean, did you not learn, Sony? Did you not catch the fact that maybe people don't want to be online all the time? I mean, that was the whole deal with making Xbox not the place to go. That was like a major thing that made Xbox not a major platform this generation, aside from other stuff, which I won't get into. Speaking of Xbox, they weren't totally silent this October, and so we're going to talk about something that Xbox did. Namely, they've actually made good on their promise to bring in original Xbox backwards compatibility, and I will say it works just as well. Better than, she says better, I'm going to go with that. It works better than the Xbox 360's backwards compatibility. And just like it, you put the game disc in your console, you download an update, and then you play the game. That's it. The updates aren't huge. I think like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic was like 2-3 gigabytes or something like that. You can actually go on and buy the game digitally if you just don't want to deal with a disc. Jennifer's been messing around with Knights of the Old Republic because that's like one of her old jams. I've installed Black, which is one of EA's old single-player shooters. You know, back when EA still made single-player games. But that's not it. I mean, there's like Red Faction 2, Ninja Gaiden Black, which the cool thing is Ninja Gaiden Black is actually part of the Game Pass program. So now they're actually taking that subscription service for, you know, basically playing a whole host of games on Xbox. Now there's original Xbox games in there, as well as Xbox 360 and Xbox One games. So that's kind of cool. The other good news is that Crimson Skies is on there, and I've really wanted to try that. I never got the chance to, so I never did. Now, the only thing I really hope for is they put Mech Assault on there, because that game was awesome, and I never owned it. So I'm really hoping that, you know, I becomes a part of the new backwards compatibility thing. But, you know, let's get away from the big stuff. And let's just go into random things. I don't have a lot. So we're going to talk about random stuff now. Thank you. The company that makes EVE Online, it's a space game. It's really hard to explain. It's like you control spaceships and trade and kill people. It's kind of like Elite Dangerous, except on a much larger scale. And people get really into it. I know I'm oversimplifying it if you play EVE Online. I'm sorry. Don't kill me. EVE Valkyrie was a game. It was a spin-off title from that EVE Online. And CCP Games is the company that publishes and makes those games. Well, so they're closing the developer that made EVE Valkyrie. Or they already closed them and rolled all those employees into other studios or laid off the ones that they couldn't move. The thing that kind of sucks is that basically means that they're not really going to bother with EVE Valkyrie anymore, which wasn't the greatest space fighter shooter game, but it was a VR title, and so it kind of sucks that they're not supporting VR anymore. That's yet another one of those things that, like, maybe it was too soon for VR. I don't know. It's not the death knell that I think a lot of people are trying to make it sound like. And it's certainly not the first time that CCP has canned one of their side projects. I mean, Dust 514 was a PS3 shooter that was, I think it was free, paid for with microtransactions or something like that. So they scrapped that before, like, really close to when the game actually came out, and now EVE Valkyrie's done the same thing. So I'd say probably the only negative part of this, the only advice I can give, is basically if CCP puts out something that isn't an EVE Online update, they're probably going to abandon it at some point. So just don't get too invested in their games, I guess, unless it's EVE Online. And then, invest to your heart's content, I suppose. Well, our last news story is kind of interesting because I didn't think this would ever be a thing, and I certainly didn't expect it when I was working there. So GameStop is introducing a rental program for pre-owned games. It's called the Power Pass. It allows subscribers to rent pre-owned games from a GameStop store, and then online it also says that it's going to be sometime in the middle of November when it becomes a thing. It may not be available at every GameStop immediately, so I wouldn't expect every GameStop to have it right away. Sorry, I'm going to pet my dog. Yeah. Oh. Okay. And the other downside is that your game rentals are going to be limited to what that GameStop has in stock at the time. Supposedly, it's going to cost about $60 for 6 months of access to as many pre-owned games as you want to check out, and I think you can have one checked out at a time. And then after those 6 months, any subscribers can actually keep the last game that they have checked out. I'm going to watch this one closely because it does sound interesting, and I'll probably try it out if Jennifer allows me. And, I mean, it's interesting. They're seeking to fill a need in the market, and I think it's probably a way for them to kind of combat the people who abuse the pre-owned return policy, because I have some horror stories about that. But interesting news nonetheless. And I guess where that leaves me now, after this really, really long video, is the conclusion. Isn't that right, Tally? Yeah. And that's all I have for October, honestly. It's kind of a big month. I do ask of you, what are your thoughts about any of these things? And did I miss anything big? Other than, game releases, obviously, you know about those. But, I mean, what did you think about the news from October? Is there anything that you wanted to talk about? So, also, if you enjoyed watching this video, even though it was surprisingly long, please like the video wherever it is down here somewhere. And go ahead and go check out Falcon Game Reviews, because that's what I like doing. I like writing. So I will see you around. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye. Okay. Ow.
You might want to move the bag.
What do you think?
You're a dork.
I guess I kind of am. Now for my dog.
You guys are insane.
Here is what happened during the month. The month of October. Shush you. You're here to help me, not laugh at me.
Butts.
Not butts, I promise. Sorry, I went kind of quick, so she's still writing. Super Mario Odyssey is where it's at. Tally? He's just being a cat. He's not doing anything wrong. He's just being weird. Let the cat be weird. So that's all I have for November. Shit.
What?
I said November.
Oh.
Yeah.
Just restart.
So.
Just say that's all I have for November. I mean October.